With the Bills resting starters against the Jets, we got a chance to see a bunch of the depth players on the field. Who stood out? I'm going to break that down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and the #1 sports podcast network. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Well, folks, welcome in. I've taken the time to study the ALL-22 coaches film from the Bills' 35-8 win over the Jets, and I want to share with you my takeaways in this ALL-22 review episode. Now, normally these episodes have a certain feel to them where you kind of know I'm going to talk passing offense, passing defense, rushing defense, get into some of the game plan stuff, talk studs and duds, all those types of things. But obviously this game's a little bit different. And so I watched the film and I went through and I really wanted to focus in on players we don't get a chance to see very often. So a lot of the backup offensive linemen, Mitch Trubisky, some of the defensive linemen, but really the linebackers, some of the back seven players. And so I just want to discuss some of these players and what they showed and how I feel about them. So we're going to talk about a bunch of players on the Bills that we normally don't get a chance to talk much about. Then we'll close things out today with a bit of an injury update, as Sean McDermott has provided some updates here ahead of Bills Jaguars this weekend. But let's start with the offensive side of the football. And obviously Mitch Trubisky came in and played every snap after the first one. And I think Mitch Trubisky's kind of an understood player in the NFL. His time as a starter has passed him by, and he's a backup, and he's got a great relationship with Josh Allen, but we don't really get a chance to see him play very often. And so I thought this was a great chance to get a look at him. And I think anybody that watched the game was pretty impressed. I thought he was very functional and was decisive with the football, mostly accurate, and did a really good job executing the play action passing game. Ultimately, the Jets defense was a total mess in this game, and they certainly had a lot of attention on defending the run and playing downhill, and the Bills just play action them to death in the passing game. 63% of Trubisky's dropbacks were play action, and he diced up the Jets. 16 of 18 on play action passes for 201 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. So they would get those linebackers that second level sucked up on the run fake and then just throw it to crossers behind them over and over and over and over again. And so it was cool to see Trubisky come in and execute. He's a guy with good physical tools. Was a top 3 pick in the NFL draft for a reason. And you saw a lot of that on display against the Jets. And so I thought he was really functional. And I know that there's always kind of been some concern about what his true capacity is if he has to play meaningful snaps. Well, he looked functional in this game. You remember the Jets game earlier in the year where Josh Allen had to come off the field on a third down. Trubisky comes in there and throws that dart over the middle of the field to Josh Palmer for a big gain. I think Trubisky's probably done more this year than any year to give us some confidence if he has to play. From there, I really focused in on the offensive line. Talked about it on the post-game reaction show yesterday, where the Bills are facing some challenging decisions with David Edwards and Connor McGovern, both expiring contracts this year. Osiris Torrance is up after this season. You have restricted free agents in Ryan Vandemark and Alec Anderson, and you've got this group of young offensive linemen that they look interesting. They look pretty good in preseason games, but what do the Bills really have? So I want to share some thoughts on these reserve offensive linemen in terms of what stood out to me watching this game. So Tylan Grable handled the left tackle position, and I'm a big fan of Tylan Grable. I think he moves really well, and that is pretty evident when you watch him. He's really fluid. He's got good foot speed. He can get out in space. He can pull. James Cook had the one longer run, and that was because, Tylan Grable and actually Sedricl Van Pran Granger, they pulled and cleared that space off the edge, and James Cook just followed them, and they created a nice hole. So I really fall in love with Grable's movement skills and how fluid he is. I like his hands a ton. You talk about playing offensive line. A lot of it is just getting your hands fit and using your hands as independent contractors and finding surface area and, just being able to kind of win that boxing match there on the edge and control reps with your hands. I think Tylan Grable's got really good hands. He's got good variety with his punches. He's got that snatch trap technique that we see so frequently from Deion Dawkins, and I thought he played really well. I think the big thing with Tylan Grable, just getting stronger. A guy that I think he played high school quarterback, switched to tight end, and then left tackle in college. You could tell, just keep getting stronger, dude, because where it's kind of missing is when he has to accelerate his feet and create some movement with a defensive end or a D tackle kind of inside him that is stacked right on time when he's got to recruit that lower half and really create that push. Just want to see him get a little bit stronger in his lower half and in his core. But I continue to be impressed with my exposures to Tylan Grable. I thought he did a good job at left tackle. Then at left guard, you had Alec Anderson, and I think we've become to know that Alec Anderson's a pretty tenacious blocker. He's got some nasty to him. And I think that's the best part of him, and I think it's also what gets him in trouble a little bit. You love a guy that wants to fire off the ball and get after dudes. The problem is he's a little bit out of control sometimes, and you want to see him kind of harness that together and apply that with good technique. That way he can be consistent with his assignments and not kind of get overextended and just a little bit too tenacious. You got to be able to control that a little bit. Mitch Trubisky was only pressured like one time in the entire game, and it was because Alec Anderson, he overset. He fanned out so hard to set on this defensive tackle, and he overset before the defensive tackle was even out of his stance, and it created a wide open lane to the A-gap and pressure on Trubisky. Now, Trubisky was able to flush, and that was the play that he actually found Reggie Gilliam on a 22-yard corner route. But, just harness that for good only, and I think you got something here in Alec Anderson. I think at a minimum, I think he's a versatile interior offensive lineman that can help you as a jumbo tight end. And, maybe there is a starter in there if you give him some more reps to develop into, one of those roles. Then you had Sedricl Van Pran Granger at center, started like 50-something games for Georgia. I think he was a 3-year team captain. He's looked good in the preseason. Last year, of course, he didn't get a chance to play in this year's preseason. Some things really stand out with Sedricl Van Pran Granger. First of all, movement skills. I think he's done a really good job of developing into a very fluid mover, whether that's getting out into the second level, getting into some longer pulls. They definitely tapped into that, and I thought he executed very well. I think he plays very well under control, and I think he's a player that is smart, right? Like you could tell that he's started 50 games for Georgia, and in pass protection, he always knew where to help, had a really good feel for where, the concerns were in pass protection. When he was uncovered, he found work, and he found good work. The challenge that I have with Sedricl Van Pran Granger is his tendency to get outreached. And so he's got really, really short arms, 31 3/8 on the arm length. That's in the 5th percentile for centers in the NFL. And you could see it on tape. Like, I love the way he gets after people. I love the movement skills. I think he's got good core strength. The problem is he just has a hard time getting his hands on guys. And so when you have short arms, it becomes very, very critical to be outstanding with your hand placement and your hand technique. You have to be able to win with hands and not allow defenders to get into your frame. And too often, Sed's in these positions where the defensive lineman has their hands placed, they're playing with extension, and they're in control of blocks. And so Sedricl Van Pran Granger is going to have to always overcome that lack of length. And the way he's going to have to do that is with improvement with his hand technique. And so that's the big area for him. Everything else looks like a starter to me, but that's a pretty big area where he's going to have to overcome some challenges, or else, I think it's always going to be him working overtime. And, against certain D tackles, I think he's going to have a really, really tough time. Ryan Vandemark's the player that we've kind of seen the most among these offensive linemen. Started at right tackle in this game, and he's logged a few starts to this point. I continue to be impressed with him. I think at a minimum, Ryan Vandemark is a quality swing tackle. Like you're first off the bench at right or left tackle, and you feel good about that. It wouldn't surprise me to see a team look at Ryan Vandemark like they did Ryan Bates. Remember the Bears signed Ryan Bates like a 3-year, $15 million deal when he was a restricted free agent. I can see there being some love out there for Ryan Vandemark. He's going to be a restricted free agent. It'll be something the Bills will have to navigate. It's a challenging situation because I think you want him back, but he's not going to start over Dawkins or Brown. And so maybe some team out there will offer him a deal that gives him a chance to compete and maybe be a starter. At a minimum, I'd love to have him back as a swing tackle, but I think he's gained enough experience. There's a really nice size profile here, an athleticism, a length profile that I think teams are going to like. So I think he's going to be tough to retain and good for him. I don't know if he's going to have that chance in Buffalo, but I think some team could look at him as a starter. One quick note on Keleki Latu, Bills tight end that was signed off the practice squad a few weeks ago. I like him. I don't think he's the most dynamic athlete by any means. Like he's not going to be a height, weight, speed mismatch out there in the passing game, but I think he's a very functional blocker. Gets after people, has good size to execute those blocks at the line of scrimmage and handle defensive ends. And I think he has good technique. He's got good tenacity, plays under good control. And as a receiver, I think he can at least be functional. So I think he's looking to me like a roster-worthy tight end that I think a lot of teams would like to have as their third tight end. So he looks like a player that at a minimum is functional to me. All right, let's look at these snap counts real quick. Offensively, the Bills played 75 snaps of offense. Mitch Trubisky played 74 of those snaps. Of course, Josh Allen played his 1 snap. At running back, James Cook played 2 snaps. And of course, congratulations, James Cook, your 2025 rushing champion. We talked all about that on Bill's Squad yesterday, so make sure you catch up with that discussion. Reggie Gilliam, 15 snaps. Ray Davis, 48 out of 75 snaps. Ty Johnson, 25 snaps out of the 75. At tight end, Keleki Latu, 51 snaps. Jackson Hawes, 22. Dalton Kincaid, 10. And Dawson Knox, 4. At wide receiver, Gabe Davis played 70 of 75 snaps. Josh Palmer, 63. Keon Coleman, 61. And then Tyrell Shavers played 4 snaps. Then offensive line-wise, Sedricl Van Pran Granger, Osiris Torrance, Alec Anderson, and Ryan Vandemark played all 75 snaps. Tylan Grable played 72. And then, of course, Spencer Brown came in for 3 snaps. So that was your offensive snap count distribution. Coming up next, we'll do the same thing. We'll talk defensive side of the football. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in-network nearby with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens, makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor exists, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone you truly connect with. I love that you can search for specialty or symptoms and quickly find the right fit, and being able to choose in-person or video visits makes scheduling way easier. You can check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of the doctor's vibe and communication style, and the real-time availability means you can book instantly with no phone tag, and if needed to book care fast, this is the first place I'd go. It just makes the entire process simple. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. Hey guys, the draft picks positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. Ever wish to become a pro quarterback getting drafted first overall by your favorite team? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode game in the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You're going to sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and evolve your teammates. You'll give input to your general manager on roster moves. You'll play the actual games in 2D and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is a totally free-to-play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we got something special just for you guys. Use promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost to start your career. Ultimate QB, football legend, QB1, it's your legacy. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's talk defense. Very similar to how we talked offense. And I really enjoyed watching Larry Ogunjobi in this game. I'll be honest, ever since the game that he was benched like a healthy scratch, I think he's played a lot better, which is great, because this was shaping up to be a real disaster of a signing. And ultimately, I don't think there's anything he can do that's going to change that. Maybe make a couple plays in the playoffs. That'd be nice. But I thought he popped in this game. Obviously, the screen recognition that he had to, realize that they were letting him through and then get down the line and tackle that receiver behind the line of scrimmage was awesome. But I think you're starting to see the athleticism show up a little bit more, the power at the point of attack show up a little bit more, and feels like there's a nice trajectory with him as the season, elongates here and we get to the postseason. Matthew Judon got his first chance to play as a member of the Buffalo Bills, and I just don't think he's got it. He looks cooked to me. Andre Jones, the last 2 weeks, has been far more impressive to me off the practice squad, and I think Matthew Judon he's an expired player. It happens. Obviously, he's had a great career, has been really quiet for the last 3, but there's just not a lot of redeeming traits to his game right now. You watch him rush. He doesn't have any get off. He's a slow burn, power style compression rusher. I mean, just has a lack of athleticism to how he gets off the football. And, the only way he can really win is to try to collapse. And it just doesn't happen fast enough for me to believe he's a viable option for this football team. And, he's got some good recognition against the run, but, he's also a guy that's kind of chasing plays a little bit. I'm sure you can understand being in that mindset of a guy that's been a good playmaker in the NFL. You've kind of expired as a player, and now you're kind of chasing things. And there were plenty of times where, he went inside and he can't, or he doesn't leverage his gap appropriately, kind of trying to make a play. And you can just tell just not clicking for him. And I think he's a guy who is not optimized right now to help a football team. And so if the Bills do tap into the practice squad for help at defensive end, I certainly hope it's Andre Jones and not Matthew Judon. I was really impressed with Jordan Phillips, a guy that's missed the last couple games and hasn't really practiced much until end of last week. He looked really good in this game. I thought he was getting off the ball well, looked very disruptive. He's a guy that has those moments where he can just kind of sell out and collapse the pocket. And you saw that show up several times against the Jets. And TJ Sanders, his sack is because Jordan Phillips blew up his man and forced that quarterback to step over. And TJ Sanders was able to use his athleticism and close. But ultimately, I think about the Bills and their rush plans that they like to have. And, they like to do stunts and kind of have one guy, pick another and loop a guy around. I feel like Jordan Phillips and his ability to just collapse is going to be really useful for some of the different stunts and twists and games that the Bills like to play with their defensive line. So feeling good about Jordan Phillips. Loved watching the linebackers, Dorian Williams and Joe Andreessen. This is the type of game that is perfect for those guys. The Jets really don't have any type of passing offense with Brady Cook. And so they just kind of run the ball. And, Dorian Williams and Joe Andreessen are good downhill players that are physical, that are highly competitive. And I thought they both really popped. Dorian Williams had some good run fills, but also a few good pass rush reps where you were able to see him kind of show that tenacity to run over a running back and get involved and, apply some heat. And then, Joe Andreessen just sniffing things out between the tackles and playing with a lot of competitive strain. I really enjoyed both of those guys. Darnell Savage was a player I really wanted to get a look at. Sean McDermott talked about just how they were interested in him before he even signed with Jacksonville last year. And, or a couple years ago, I think he signed in Jacksonville. And look, I know that the book on Darnell Savage in Buffalo won't be written off of one game against the Jets in Week 18. I thought he struggled the most of any defensive back. Bills played a decent amount of man coverage. He was the least sticky of any of them. Really kind of struggled to, feel a route and then, drive on the break. He had multiple chances to make a play at the catch point. He wasn't able to do it. Just didn't find myself super impressed with Darnell Savage in this game. And, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully he can be part of the full offseason next year and get a chance to maybe claim a role. But this exposure really didn't inspire me. I want to talk a little bit about Jordan Hancock. He's a player that I've had my eyes on all year. He got an extended opportunity to play just about every snap in this game. And I like that he makes a lot of full speed mistakes. That's what I can say about him. He triggers, he'll fly downhill. The angle might not always be correct. He might not always, square up the ball carrier, but he plays hard in coverage. He will, aggressively drive on things, even if he's not supposed to. So I think these reps are really good for him. I don't think he's really stood out in any one area. There's been lapses in zone coverage. There's been lapses in angles and playing downhill, but I think these reps are good for a young player like him that, has been tried at a lot of different spots, whether that's been the slot or in deep safety looks. I want him to be able to settle in and just get a feel, right, for alignments and how to play a specific position. I think that's what I'm seeing with Hancock, as a guy that they're trying at a lot of spots and doesn't have anything figured out, so get him in a spot and give him a chance to settle in and gain some comfort. But there's a lot of likable failure if that makes sense, with Jordan Hancock. Real quick on defensive snap counts, the Bills played only 47 snaps of defense. At defensive end, A.J. Epinesa, 32 out of 47. Matthew Judon, 31. Javon Solomon, 31. I don't see it with Javon Solomon, guys. He's just a player that all year long has failed to really take advantage of his opportunities. Doesn't look very dynamic as a pass rusher and certainly can't defend the run. At D tackle, T.J. Sanders, 30 of 47 snaps. Phi Mathis, 24. Continue to get a little bit more interested in Phi Mathis. Not that he's overly dynamic, but he just plays so hard. And that competitive strain is something that's easy to enjoy. Larry Ogunjobi, 18 snaps. Jordan Phillips, 18 snaps. Deion Walker, 3. At linebacker, Joe Andreessen and Dorian Williams, all 47. And then Keontae Jenkins played 23 snaps. I like Keontae Jenkins. I think he's a functional depth linebacker that, in the preseason, training camp, and in this game, I thought did some good things. At corner, Trey White, all 47 snaps. Max Hairston, 42. And Cam Lewis, 24, kind of playing a little bit in the slot, some safety as well. And then at safety, Darnell Savage, 46 snaps. Jordan Hancock, 41. Cole Bishop, 6. And Sam Franklin, 6. All right, folks, coming up next, I want to just get into what Sean McDermott shared regarding the injury status of, Matt Prater, Max Hairston, Ty Johnson, and more. So we'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. And it's easy to check the weekly specials before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It's going to add extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, folks, let's close this thing out by reflecting on the injury updates that Sean McDermott shared during his Monday press conference. Regarding kicker Matt Prater, actually somewhat of an encouraging update. He said he's day-to-day, and it didn't sound like it's crazy to think he can go on Sunday. McDermott said they will work out some kickers this week in case he can't go on Sunday. but it sounds to me like they're going to sign a kicker to the practice squad. And then Sean said they'll have a plan with Prater and a plan without Prater. So it's challenging to have the right idea of what to do here because, if Prater's fragile and now you're in a game where you can't kick a field goal at all, that's not good. That's not good at all. So if Matt Prater can go, you need to have a level of confidence that he's going to handle those kicking duties. You can't put him out there and then he aggravates the quad and now you don't have a kicker. So it's a tough situation. Kicker problems are just maddening. They're so annoying. That's where the Bills are right now. So we'll see who they work out. We'll see what they do. But even if Prater, can play like he could against the Jets, I'll be holding my breath the entire time, whether or not he can actually function, or if he goes out there and kicks one extra point and the quad's aggravated and now you don't have a kicker the rest of the game because you counted on him. So it's a challenging situation. Otherwise, here's the other side of that. You're signing some guy off the street to be your kicker in the playoffs. So, it's not like, well, if you're concerned about Prater, then just go with someone else. Well, you're going with someone else that's available right now for a reason. Ty Johnson is day-to-day with an ankle injury. Doesn't sound like Maxwell Harrison's gonna play this week. Sean didn't rule him out, but he did say he's unlikely to play this week. So they'll have to figure something out. The practice squad elevations, they reset. So during the season, you can only be elevated 3 times, but now that's gone. And, Dane Jackson, for example, is a guy that was out of practice squad elevations. And now that it's the playoffs, the Bills can elevate him. So I'm thinking that there's a good chance Dane Jackson is elevated on Sunday. Or the other side of that is, they look at Max Hairston's situation and realize that he's not going to be able to play again this year. Then you put him on injury reserve and you sign Dane Jackson to your active roster, something like that. Sean McDermott said that Terrell Bernard, Daquan Jones, and Jordan Poyer are all improving. Of course, a hamstring for Poyer, a calf for Jones and Bernard. Obviously I don't know that Terrell Bernard, whether it's the calf, the elbow, the ankle, I don't know if he's going to be able to help this team, but Jones and Poyer are 2 guys that I hope are ready to go this Sunday because the Bills are going to need those players. And then Sean McDermott did confirm that they will not be activating anyone off injured reserve this week. So Ed Oliver not happening this week. And then, of course, Tyler Bass not happening at all. Like Sean, again, on Monday, but has consistently said he had surgery. He is not an option. So miss you, Tyler Bass. Kicker stuff is highly, highly annoying. So hopefully that gets resolved. Hopefully the Bills get through the week of practice, without any injuries. But we'll obviously cover it throughout the course of the week. Now, one thing that I've picked up on in the feedback that's been given to me is that everyone is really eager to talk about the Jaguars. Me too. So I'm going to change my schedule a little bit this week, and we're going to go, with our deep dive into the Jaguars. I'll spend all day Tuesday studying, researching, watching film, and then the Wednesday podcast will be the Jaguars primer, so everyone can get calibrated and ready to go for this game. Then we'll have crossover Thursday with Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars. Then, of course, we'll get the Bill squad later in the week. We'll get my final thoughts. So still plenty to do, but I'm not going to make you wait until Friday for that primer. I know everyone's chomping at the bit, so we'll get to that for our next episode here on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.